The next part of our portrait project will be glazing skin tones over top of the colored underpainting that you've created. So, the first step in glazing the skin tones is actually mixing the skin tones. You can see here, don't judge my slightly dirty palette, I'm starting to mix some of my skin colors. The key to mixing skin colors is using red, yellow, and a touch of blue until you get a nice solid brown, and all you have to do is add white to it and kind of see where you're at with your skin tone. Now, there's no one right or wrong way to make a skin tone, right? Everybody's got slightly different tonations to the skin. Also, within one person, there's often multiple colors of skin. So don't think about just mixing one color that you're going to glaze your whole figure with. You're going to mix multiple colors. Now, right now, I have a couple different colors for the skin tone. I'm also thinking about what color I might want to mix for the lips. As you're mixing, the key is just adding little tiny bits at a time until you get to the color that you want. If you have big globs, it's really easy to go too far. And we're just little tiny nibs makes a big amount of difference, especially as you're adding the blue and the red. So remember, as you're, there's no real right or wrong way to do this. It's just kind of trial and error. You can use any variety of reds. A very popular red to use for skin color is your alizarin crimson that you have in your kit. Mixing with that your cadmium yellow, and then a tiny touch of phthalo blue and a white is a good color scheme to start with. But as you can see, I'm actually going through and starting with a variety of reds just to get a, little interesting combination that I will use. The other thing that you want to think about is your color underpainting that you have underneath is actually going to influence your skin color. I did a green underpainting, so I'm leaning my skin tones a little bit to the pink side to kind of counteract that green. Make sure that you're also mixing a nice shadow color that you can nib in here and there. A good shadow color, remember, don't use black. You want to use your phthalo blue, alizarin crimson, a touch of yellow. You could also mix in a little bit of burnt umber if you have it. And you're just trying to mix a nice dark color that you can also pull into your shadows if as needed. Whether you're in oil or acrylic, you're going to still want to mix up a few different skin tones ahead of time. If you're in oil, I can keep going and mix up all the colors that I'm using for my entire painting if I wanted to, because you can save them. If you're in acrylic, you're going to kind of think about working a section at a time. But you at least want to have 3-4 different skin colors mixed up that you can pull from and blend. Because remember, when you're working with acrylics, the key is to have those colors ready, have your dry flat brush to mix in between. That way you can work quickly and blend those two together. Now, as I'm starting to mix or finish up mixing here, once I have these all mixed, if you're in acrylic, you can add a little bit of that slow dry medium to them to kind of make sure that they stay wet. If you're in oil, I would just put a little pool of your 3-part medium to the side. That way you can take from it as needed. All right, so on to the glazing part. As I mentioned, If you're in oil, you're going to use your 3-part classic medium. That's um, your Damar varnish, your linseed oil, and your Gamsol. If you're in acrylic, you're going to use your 2-part slow dry medium, which is your matte medium and retarder. And I'm going to add that to my paint as needed. I'm only going to add a little bit when if I need it to add some fluidity. If I really want to cover to make my background brighter, then I'm going to add very little, right? Because it's going to be more opaque. Now, areas where I want it to show through, for example, in my shadows that are greener, I might want to let it get a little more transparent. Then I'm going to add more of my medium. Now, as you're going, notice how I'm still kind of pulling from that variety of colors that I'm using. If I'm in my shadow, I kind of pull that little bit of a darker brown or skin color. In the lighter areas, I'm pulling from my lighter skin tones that I've mixed. And as I go, I'm blending in between with that large, dry, flat brush. That way I can kind of keep going and going as needed. So I'll show you just a little bit of a detail here as to what I'm talking about. I've got my lighter skin tone, I've got that kind of medium skin tone, and then I have another skin tone that I'm pulling into the shadows. But I might allow some of that darker green to show through here and there because it makes a really nice shadow color where needed, or if I want a really small little fine line of dark, I can let that green sort of peep through there. Now, the cool part about using these colored grounds is it really makes the skin color luminous. This is one of my favorite styles of underpainting for that reason, because it starts out kind of kooky looking, but it allows the skin to have that kind of luminous glow to it in a way that doesn't look the same as if you used a white background. It looks very different because that dark kind of helps the skin to glow. The same way that our skin looks kind of luminous because we've got all those blood vessels and all these other things underneath. That's having that darker color underneath gives that skin that luminous kind of lifelike color to it. As you go, like I said, I've filled in my color and I'm taking a dry flat brush and blending them out. With oil, you have some time to work on the blending. With acrylic, you gotta kind of get it in there right away as you're working before the paint dries. So make sure you have that dry brush on hand as you're working. The other thing that you can use is a soft cloth. As you'll see here, I'm kind of coming in here and there with a soft cloth and blending those out over top as well. And the key as you're working, don't worry about the little details. Like I'm not going in and working on the eyebrows. You can see this. I've kind of got the Mona Lisa look to them. They're totally gone right now. I'm going to come back in the last layer and add those in as a finishing touch. Little details of the eyes, eyelashes, little fine details, those are all going to come on the last layer. I'm just trying to get the overall skin tone the way I want it to look. And I can come back and do those finest highlights, details, all those things in the last layer. So I wanted to talk a little bit about hair too, because that's always kind of a top question that students have. Now, for my underpainting, I kind of did this real wild pink color. When you're working on your underpainting, if you haven't started the hair yet, you can do it a more natural color if you want. You could do it kind of a wacky under color like I did. The same thing, it's going to peep through here and there and kind of give it a little bit of pop. But either way works. So as I start my painting, same thing, I want to mix up a dark and a light so that I have something to start with as I'm pulling through the hair. And I'm not going to think about individual hairs. I want to think about how the overall light and dark falls across the hair. Um, Now, I've got the example that I'm using has slightly curly hair, but the idea is the same, whether it's really curly hair or someone that has braids or straight hair. You're trying not to focus on all those little details. You're trying to focus on where the light and dark hits, because I'm going to come in on that last layer and do all those little tiny fine line details. I'm just looking for the overall play of light and shadow as I go. Um, and as you're working, you still want to have a flat brush to kind of help you blend in between as you're working. Um, and you know, you're if it helps you, you can kind of think back to our first project, our second project, where we were kind of looking at things blurry. Sometimes with hair, it helps to kind of blur your eyes, not focus on those individual hair details. Look at the bigger picture as you're working, because you're going to come in and do those fine details last. All right, so we're gonna look at one last thing. Um, you know, you want to think about your overall piece. I wanted to show here how example of glazing. Here's where I thought, oh, that pink of that shirt is really kind of toning down or changing my skin color, so I decided I wanted to make it look greener. So I did a nice kind of greenish yellowish glaze over the whole thing to try to help my skin tone pop. That's another example of glazing, where I can go in and sort of change the overall color of something, because I'm thinking about how the overall piece plays. Um, and that's something you can do on this layer too. You're thinking about the overall kind of play of color within your piece, um, because a change in the skin color will also change the way you look at different aspects of the painting. So kind of working out that overall color scheme is a good idea on this layer as well.